I think we lost too many people at the coffee break. Before I forget, there's a signing sheet at the back of the room, so if you can sign next to your name to show that you were here, that'd be great. It should be at the back over there on the table. No need to do it now. And so we can start our second session of the day, and it's a bit weird for me to introduce Miguel because by now you all know who he is, but our next speaker nonetheless is Miguel Clavero, who's a researcher at the Estación Biológica de Doñana. Thank you, Miguel.
Oh, we have the sound. I'll try. If I was luckier than Peter yesterday, and I wanted to use this, but if it doesn't work, I'll change to the microphone. So, seems to be working well now. So I'm gonna present a work that has not been done yet. So it is not very nice. No, I'll change to the microphone. This one better probably. Yes. So I'm going to present a work that is not really done. We are working on it, but I want to present how or the idea that we have to build something like land use or land cover maps from historical sources. ¿Se puede apagar la luz esta de? So the work has been nicely introduced by Begoña and also by Dominique. So we are all aware that landscapes are changing, and landscape change or land use change is associated with important changes on biodiversity patterns. And it is, of course, we all more or less we are here aware that it is not only short-term changes that drive these biodiversity changes, biodiversity patterns, but also longer time frames are very important for biodiversity dynamics. So how do we approach to reconstruct past land cover or land use maps? So there's this approach is the one followed by Kaplan and so on, which is based on mechanistic assumptions on relationships between population or estimated population and the land use. They did that to reconstruct forest cover in Europe for 1 millennium or so, but you know they assumed that some suitability for agriculture of the land pooled with the estimation of human population density will give an accurate picture of forest cover. And probably there are some nice patterns here, but there are also strange things like, you know, you can see the border between Portugal and Spain here when Portugal and Spain didn't exist. So there is something strange with the reconstruction there. And just looking at that, you probably this mechanistic relationship between people and forests do not work very well at regional level, at least. There are also the information that we get from pollen cores or for pollen deposited in cores in wetlands and so on. And this is a very nice information about it has a very good taxonomic resolution and a very deep time information. We can go a long time ago. But the thing is that especially is not very, the spatial integration of the information is not very straightforward. So we really don't know how big is the information, how big is the area we are getting information from. Then we have maps, we have historical maps. There are maps telling about land uses, or about crops and forests. This is a forest map of Asturias, a region in northern Spain from the mid-19th century. This was called the dasographic maps, or it was something like a quick fashion. Okay. We have some of those forest maps from Spain, but it doesn't cover the whole country, but we have some of them. And they are truly interesting. This thing here have different type of forests or shrub formations, and it's quite interesting information. And then we have the images that someone asked before about the paintings. So we can have an idea of the landscape from paintings, but just as Begoña says, photographs are more informative. So we can get nice information from photographs. These underground photographs has also the problem that are not equally distributed across space. So there are certain spots that are more photographed and more easily photographed. People tend to photograph mountains, and mountains give more information because you have more surface in the image. But then you have, since the beginning of the 20th century, the aerial flights. This is a famous American flight in Spain that we usually consider the first images, but in fact there are previous images. Just in some part of Spain there are images from the 30s, and there was another flight in the 40s, also not complete. And this, I wanted to put this because this is El Rocío in the year 56. This is where we are going to go on Saturday, the ones that stay here. So it is like it looks like today. You probably heard about the problems of irrigation crops in Doñana and so on. So you can see the change between the 56 and now. In fact, it is, if we had the photo from the 90s, we wouldn't see the crops even, but have been huge land use changes. So our idea was to try to build land use changes from species records, or for crop and forest species records, for information about the presence of a species on a site. And to do that, we mined the information contained in this source, which is a geographical dictionary from Spain from the mid-19th century. The information was collected probably between around the 40s decade, around 1840s, between 40 and 45. And it is a huge dictionary with 16 volumes, lots of pages. It's almost 12,000 pages, and a lot of articles, almost 70,000 articles describing basically every population nucleus in Spain, but also geographical elements like mountains and rivers and streams and so on. We went through all the articles and collected the information on different species, and 23,000 of those articles provided at least one record of one species. Here I focus on vegetation and crops. We have also information on wild animals, and Paco will be showing the information on fish later. But regarding vegetation, we have information on something like 500 species, wild species. Some of them are difficult to relate to actual taxonomic species, but for most of them we have the information. And then and there are 25,000 records. And for crops, we have something like 250 types with lots of records. It's 125,000 records of crops. And these records have this image. This is a 23,000 sites with information. As you can see, there are huge spatial biases on the information. There are records with a lot of information. There are records with few. The biases are complex because on the one hand, Spain is not homogeneously populated, so there are places with more villages than others. And on the other hand, the correspondents, the people in charge of the information, were not equally prone to provide information on fauna, on vegetation, and so on. So the information on crops is almost always provided, but on vegetation, not always. And there were hundreds of correspondents for this work. So the decisions of the individual people providing the information is translated into uncontrollable biases. And I'm going to show you some examples about distribution of trees and crops. This is the beach, Fagus sylvatica, which is a northern distribution, just as the present one. We have this Quercus suber, I have forgotten the name of the cork oak. Yes. We have this, in general, pine trees, all trees within the genus Pinus, which cannot be differentiated in our data set. We have the distribution of the olive groves, of chestnut trees, and then the American crops that we previously mined a 16th century database and didn't have any American crop, and now in the 19th century they were already widespread. So you have here the corn, which is basically absent in the center of the Iberian Peninsula, and you have the potato that was already widespread, but at that moment was still being introduced in many places. So there are reports stating that we are introducing the potato and it seems to be doing very well. It was that in that moment. So this is the information we have. We have gone through the Madot dictionary. We have mined the whole source, go through all the dictionary, all of its pages, and have collected records for different species. What we are doing now is modeling the distributions of the different species. We have already done that with animal species. I'll show a couple of examples now, but we are compiling information on climate variables, topography, also soil data, and also population. We have a human population census from the mid-19th century that we can project on a good spatial scale. So we are using that to model species, and we have, for each species, we will have an estimated suitability across the whole country. We have done that with the eel, with the European eel. We had the data, this is data from the Madoz, so we could model the distribution of the eel in the mid-19th century, and we could compare it with the present situation. It is like that, so it's the huge collapse of the species. We have done it also for the wolf, that Peter showed the part of the work yesterday. So from the result of the model, we could provide an estimated distribution of the wolf in the mid-19th century in Spain. So this is what we are doing now for the crop and forest species. We will have a model like that of the wolf for every one of the species, or at least for the most common species in the vegetation and crops. And the tricky thing now is how to integrate that information to generate land use maps. That it is only this idea that we have. We are working on it. This is what I wanted to show, and maybe we have good ideas about refining our own idea. Our idea was, from the estimated suitability for each species, we would do something like a multivariate clustering to get groups. We will have, these final branches of the trees are 5 square kilometers that will be grouped in terms of the association of the estimated probability of different species. We will have, I estimate that 100 species with a suitability for each cell, and these cells would be grouped in terms of the multivariate variability of those suitabilities. This group would be interpreted through another multivariate analysis, some kind of ordination method, some kind of PCA or whatever, to see how they are, or what are the characteristics of those groups. And then this is probably, we have not gone through it, but it is probably the most tricky part. We should harmonize those groups with actual categories for land use covers. Taking the Korean categories or whatever the categories we want to finally combine with. This would probably mean pooling groups, and until we have a comparable set of groups with actual land cover maps. So our idea on what we are working is try to get from the Madot dictionary, trying to get some kind of comparable data with actual land covers. Our grouping will probably be much more diverse than the land cover maps, because you know the crops in the land cover maps are very poorly defined, but we will have a lot of information of individual crops that we will probably have to pool. But anyway, this is our idea. We want to compare these two sources. But then we have some information from older sources. We mine these Relaciones Topográficas de Felipe II, which is a questionnaire that was done in Spain in the 16th century. It was supposed to cover whole Spain, but in the end it was limited to some villages in let's say central Spain. But there are almost 700 villages, or 630 villages with answers to the questionnaire, and we have used those data. Well, those data are now publicly available for everyone. They are in GBIF, and this is the data paper we published with Duarte, led by Duarte. And we have already used this data, also with the eel. We could see places where the eel was mentioned and places where fish were mentioned, but eel was not, and we thought that they were eel absences. And we made a model, and the model, if you notice, is the results are very, very similar to those produced with the 19th century data, and it is remarkable that two sources with almost 300 years in difference, providing totally independent data, they provide very, very similar models, and very, very totally distinct from the current situation. But there are more sources that we have not worked yet. There is, for example, this Catastro de Ensenada from the mid-18th century, which huge amount of information about forest and crops. And there is this mid-20th century geographical dictionary also informing about forest, crops, and fauna. It has specific information on fauna. And these are only some examples. There are at least 15 geographical dictionaries in Spain since the beginning of the 19th century. So this is only the Spanish case, and I guess that from other places in Europe there will be a similar situation. And I wanted to show how this information would fit with, at least temporarily, with other sources or other approaches to describe landscape variation, because this was our idea of the whole workshop, just try to integrate approaches from different views. So the polling approach would cover basically all the temporal scope of our approach and would go much further back in time. So, but we still have a nice possibility of comparing the outputs of the two approaches. Then we have the forest maps that we have them from the mid-19th century. So once we produce our land use maps, we would be able to compare it, at least from some Spanish regions, with actual forest maps. And then we have the aerial photographs, at least for whole Spain since the mid-19th century. So this dictionary, if we ever start working with it, I hope so, would be a key element just to engage all approaches, because if we describe land uses with the same approach that in the mid-19th century, we do the same approach for the mid-20th century, also based on species records, we would be able to just link it directly to aerial photographs and then to satellite derived land uses and so on. So this is what I wanted to tell. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. So we have time for questions. I see already one here.
Thank you. Such a brilliant talk. In the last slide you were showing right now, yeah, this one. I know you probably don't have an answer for this question, but still, I would dare to make it. How do you envisage bringing together all these sources, accounting for the time uncertainty you're going to find? Because just for the bit I know, which is pollen, it's super difficult to find anything below 10 years resolution. So in a sediment core. Mm-hmm. So how do you, or how would you agree on having chronologies altogether?
But I think it is actually very difficult to be very for very narrow time windows. I think we have to use like wide time windows for that. But the thing is that the approach is probably different because also the spatial scale for our approach is not fine enough as the one for the using photographs. We cannot go to the meters or to the hundreds of meters. We in fact will produce information on large cells. We are working usually on 5 kilometer cells. So it is quite, it is good for the large scale analysis, but it is very poor for the smaller scale resolution. And for the temporal scale, it is also quite similar. So I think it would only be useful for quite long-term chronologies.
Yeah, so for instance, if you take the Madoz dictionary, mm-hmm. You were saying that's 1850, right? So is that precisely narrowed down into a particular year, or it covers 100 years? Or
it covers. It's much more complex than that because it is the information was collected during a 10-year period, which is probably since something like 1830 something up to 1840 and a lot. It started to be published, in fact, in 1845. So the information was collected from the previous 10 years. But then, to add further complexities, other information collecting initiatives that had been developed before were collected for the Madoz. So it integrates information for quite I wouldn't say quite a long period because we don't know, because it depends on the reporter. So the Madoz said Madoz was the leader. It is very funny because Madoz wrote that the real authors of this book were the reporters, and they say I will give glory to them, but he never mentioned them. So we are all the time saying Madoz, Madoz, Madoz because it's the only name associated with that. But the reporters were responsible of gathering information by directly collecting it, and also being informed about previous data gathering collections. So the information is we always put it as mid-20th century and 1850 as a reference, but it is.
And then you consider that as a snapshot.
Yes.
Okay. 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 I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Irene?
I have a very small question. It's about the use of aerial photographs for reporting crops. I was surprised of that because it's easy to distinguish the crop using the photographs, the aerial photographs? I mean, for maybe the olive trees, maybe it's easy. But for the rest of the grasslands, it's easy for you?
No, but we are not working with aerial photographs yet. But it has been done in Andalusia, for example. It is translated into land cover the whole American flight. So I think they do simply wood crops and herbaceous crops and so on. It is that
okay.
simple.
I understood. Sorry, I understood you were gonna use them.
No. We are working on that, and our intention is try. You know, if we ever go to follow the same approach here, we could compare with the outputs of the aerial photographer. We have not.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. I'm always impressed by all the data sources that you dig out of the history. So this 1580, you called it a questionnaire. What was the purpose of this questionnaire, and who was taking part in it? And
it was reportedly an initiative to characterize the kingdom. It was, you know, it had a letter from the king at the beginning of it, and the king, or whoever wrote in the king's name, said that it was to give greatness to the kingdom. But in fact, it was an approach to know the kingdom, because he was, the governors at that time probably were not really aware of how the territory was, and that was important. Imagine for taxation, because the local novelties had this information for taxation, but the king wanted to be on top of that and get his own information for taxation. So he had to develop these description initiatives. And it was really a questionnaire. It was because it was a structured questionnaire with up to around 50 questions. Dealing with everything, with everyday life and how the houses were built and so on. And we focused on the information on crops, because they were specific questions. There were specific questions about woodlands and about fauna also.
So would you say that this is subjective data, because it goes back to every respondent of the questionnaire?
It was...
Is it subjective in the sense that if you ask me, how much corn do you have, I kind of just...
yes,
it's very different than if you measure my corn from remote sensing data.
For sure it is, but I'm quite sure that the people did not know why they were being asking the question. There were specific instruction of how to select the people at each village. They were saying the question have to be answered by at least 2 people, and their numbers are there, so we know who answered the questions, and they had to sign their questions. So it was that information exists, and I am sure that they did not know why suddenly these people came, like astronauts, came to the village and started asking questions.
Super interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I imagine these villagers would have been terrified. And I would also imagine that they would try to hide things, because they knew that the state always wants taxes. But my question is related, and it's, are there any other, are there more, from the 16th century, when the fiscal state in Spain is consolidating, are there things like more regular taxation cadastres? Have you considered using them? Do they exist? Like in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, we have in the 16th century different taxation-related documents. We have in the Ottoman Empire in many places. So I was wondering, it's probably less detailed in terms of recording the natural environment than this questionnaire, which is it's puzzling. I mean, how they came to this idea and how they what they wanted to do with this knowledge. This is another question that is fascinating to me, how they were planning to process it. But it's my question is more is there anything else that you could potentially use?
It is, this is quite, this is a cadastre. This is really based on production, and it is quite quite focused on seeing how productive and what was the richness generated by each resource. This one, it is hardly, I have the feeling, or scholars report that it is, it was intended intended to fine-tune taxation, but it is difficult to think how the information produced here gets into taxation strategy. It is not clear. And in fact, the information from several places in Spain do not exist. But this is much more focused source with a lot of information.
So there was nothing earlier than the 7050 one? I mean, only the 1580. Like, there is no, like, I don't know, cadastre of capital tax or of, I don't know, the tithe that was paid to the church, something, and any additional information that would come with it?
There is, in times of Felipe II's father, which is of Charles, King Charles, there is it is called the Censo de Pecheros, which is a relation of the people paying taxes in basically every village, and it is very interesting. But it is not linked to natural resources, so it doesn't have the information about the origin of the taxation.
So even crops it doesn't have.
Yes.
Okay.
So it is basically reporting how many people paying taxes and how many taxes are being paid in each village. Yes.
And one more question: is there any research? It's more like source critique question of a historian. Like, was the Relaciones inspired in any way by taxation system in other countries? Like, for instance, in the Ottoman Empire, because it sounds like. In the Ottoman Empire, in our database that we have, which is like a digitized taxation cadastres from the 15th and 16th century, there are more than 300 different entries for crops and productive activities. Like, they also collected incredibly detailed information. So I was wondering to what extent the Spanish Empire, that was in war and competition with the Ottomans, was thinking, okay, they have this great fiscal system. Perhaps we can also squeeze something more from our subjects if we model, kind of follow the model.
Never thought about that, but it really looks like that it could be like that. Yes, I'll dig. Yeah, thank you very much for the.
I'm just thinking also like the Habsburg aspect, in the sense like would kind of experts circulate also between, I mean, perhaps it's irrelevant, but on the other hand, it might be relevant for the question of biodiversity if this knowledge about cadastres around Europe was circulating in any way, because you have the Habsburg Empire, so like he also ruled Austria, he also ruled the Netherlands, like if they were circulating with the admin knowledge on creating these cadastres and with the governance ideas. This is another aspect.
For sure, it is a way of approaching this, because in Felipe's father was actually the Habsburg-Hungarian emperor, so they had many a diversity of administration procedures and so on, and for sure they were inspired by that. Yes. It has to be, the first time they tried the Relaciones, they sent it to the priest. So it is also, I don't know if they wanted the priest to describe how the village were and who could get the taxes from, but it didn't work. So in the second try, they said the Relaciones have to be pulled even if the priest gave the information 2 years ago. So I don't know, maybe it's something, I don't know if the Habsburg-Hungarian process involves the priest in somehow.
Thank you. So I'm mindful of the time, but we also have a very long lunch break, and we had a couple more questions, so I think we can take them. Peter, you had one or a comment? I'm not sure.
Thank you, as ever. Just with the geographical lexicons, I think it's just very much, just a comment, zeitgeist. This is the 19th century, this is what you did. You did the geographical lexicon. If you look at your country, in Europe at least, there will be something like this. So I wouldn't, and this is very much not in the spirit of cadastral things, because this questionnaire type of, that's like a lexicon that they were doing. But I was wondering two things. First is whether there's some sort of another, you know, sort of preparation kind of material for the meadows, because my experience is that this is a distillation of lots of material, and I was just wondering whether there are the original entries somewhere lying where that could be richer, and I don't know if this is something or that's just it's non-existent. That's the first thing. And the second thing, I couldn't quite understand how you want to turn that into land use maps. I can imagine, but you know, what kind of maps, what will they look like? Because, you know, map it says, you know, 50 hectares of this and 20 hectares. So how are you going to do that? I cannot quite imagine.
We are going to derive land use in land uses in huge areas. Our idea is about 25 square kilometers cell, so that's huge. We cannot define borders, we cannot define anything. So the idea is to compare that with present day data and so on at that large scale. So we will not be able to define patches of habitat. Then what we will have will be a suitability map for every species. We will have for the chestnut, we will have one for the olive groves and so on, and then try to find associations in that, so we can describe landscape configurations of what kind of crops and vegetation were typical of each area, and then group them. That we will be able to make that for sure, and it will be very nice. The tricky part there is just to try to put it in a comparable way with present day categories. So that I am not really sure how will we do it, because we have to get our results first. So I think the results will be interesting enough when to describe the spatial variability of how the areas look like. And we want to use that then to model also the wildlife, and also we have information on livestock. We have livestock censuses from the mid-19th century that we can also use for that. But then, you know, the tricky part, I'm not sure. And I didn't understand the first question, Peter. I did not understand the first question. Yes. There must be, and that's one of the most fascinating parts of the meadows, because there are for sure, but they have never been found. And the most fascinating part is that the information was collected for Spain and the Territorios de Ultramar, which is the colonies. By that time, it was Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and the Marianas. So we know that the information for those territories was collected, but we don't know in which wardrobe it is. So, you know, when you tell it to US researchers that information on the Marianas, they go crazy. But we don't know where it is. Yes, no, I think not very hard, because it just goes in the darkness of the past, and yes, I think it has not been tried very hard. Yes.
Yeah, maybe we can all search for those documents in the Archivo de Indias during our trip. No, thanks, Miguel. But just a quick question. You answered the first half of my question, which was going to be what the ultimate data product is that you envision for your work when you integrate all of these amazing data sources. And the second half of the question was going to be, how do you envision that data product being used by policymakers in the development of biodiversity policy?
We are already working on that line with the wolf. Well, our paper on the wolf was quite focused on these on these historical baselines, and in this idea of the shifting baselines, because in Spain there is this feeling that the wolf is expanding, and there are now lots of wolves. This is quite information is promoted by the lobbies that want the wolf to be a hunted species and so on, but we could show that in fact the situation is very, very bad if compared with a historical situation that was already bad. So we could model and estimate the distribution, and we were just like showing this information to say that the conservation status is unfavorable, and even if it is somehow stable or even a little bit increasing, it is clearly unfavorable. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I think we can.
Yep. Thank you very much. So for our next talk, we actually have two speakers that are going